And so while these are rather prominent places for or problems within religion, in itself it's not significant or not sufficient to say religion itself is a problem. But now we turn to the question of, should we consider atheism as being religious? Some have suggested, and even Prothero does in his section, that atheism should be understood as a religion. Connected with this, certain courts in the United States especially have argued and have ruled that atheists should be accorded the same religious rights and freedoms as other religions. And so they've kind of recognized atheism as a religion in order to provide people with certain rights. Now, in response, a lot of atheists would say that they aren't religious. That's the whole point, is that you're not religious. And are disturbed that they only get certain rights when or if they act like a religion. In situations, for example, where a public organization invites all sort of religious groups to participate in a public governmental function, right? And so a prayer before a city council meeting. So you have a Christian minister, a Jewish rabbi, and then you know, a Hindu priest, a Buddhist priest, maybe even a person from Wicca or something else. Can atheists participate? Well, only if they act in a religious type of manner, right, in function of. So, you know, there's a lot of that where there's some people suggesting yes, and a lot of atheists saying no, we're not religious. Much of this question of whether we should consider atheism a religion or not is very closely connected to that question we started the semester off with. What constitutes religion? And so, in some ways, atheists act like other religious people, but in some ways, they, of course, don't act like some religions. Let's look at a couple of categories. First is the question of belief. In many cases, what's emphasized, especially in the United States, is that religions are belief systems. So, do atheists have beliefs? Well, some atheists would claim they do not. And that what they have is the absence of belief. And the frequent thing that some will use, it will say, is bald a hair color. Very offended when people use that example. Is bald a hair color? Well, of course the answer is no. But it is a hair style. Yeah, so I mean it's still connected with hair. Well, part of the problem is that atheists look at the term belief as being something without evidence, right? That's wishful thinking. So anything an atheist believes, according to the claim, is based on evidence. It's warranted, whereas belief in the context of religion is based off of wishful thinking. But still, I think that if we step back and try to do it, from a free, what's the word I'm looking for? Disinterested type of perspective, right? It has some scholarly dissonance. There is still a way in which even the proposition there is no God serves as a proposition that provides guidance and meaning in life, which is very much like what the fact, or the proposition, Jesus is the Son of God operates within the Christian life. Right? So there is that proposition that provides guidance. And so I think that while I understand why atheists would say they don't have beliefs, I think it's a little specious of an argument. How about when we come to the terms of a creed, a common set of beliefs that atheists have, a creed that they share? Well, no. Right? I mean, but yes. There is no statement of propositions that all atheists are expected to adhere to, like you might find in some traditions of you've got to believe these things. But on the other hand, atheists are united by propositions like there is no God, reason is the way to discover truth. But on the other hand, there's nothing written down. Atheists wouldn't agree on a variety of other issues. And there's no sort of authority that would enforce the creed. Right? You don't have a denominational board or a pope or somebody like that to make sure everybody's following. Other than social forces, right? You know, you marginalize somebody if they don't believe it. You make fun of them. What about community? Community is an interesting one. Now, certainly, you can be an atheist by yourself and just be an atheist. But in recent years, in the United States and in England, atheist churches have popped up. And that's their term, not my term. Collections, assemblies of individuals, atheists, gathering together, frequently on Sundays. They're coming together as a group. And so some atheists recognize the need that it's even useful to associate with others you share philosophical commitments with. And so we're starting to see community develop within atheism. Also on there, I guess I deleted this one off there, practice. Now there isn't shared practices across the community like the 5 pillars would be in Islam, or baptism, or communion might be in Christianity. Nor is there anything inherent in atheism that would be expressed in practice. But in these atheist churches, they will have practices, right? Meditations on beauty, on wonder, readings from atheist thinkers, speeches, maybe even songs. This land is your land? I don't know. So, you know, they sing in some atheist churches as well. So yes, there's a denial of God. But then you have these rituals that bring some atheists together. But you can still be an atheist without them. What about morality? A key component of religions tend to be ethics or morality. They have a code, or they have ideas about what's good behavior, what's bad behavior. Are morality and religion intertwined? Many religious people would say yes. No religion, no morality. Atheists would say no. You can be moral without being religious or believing in God. So can you? Yeah, right? I mean, obviously you can be a moral person without believing in God. But the one thing that's interesting here is that in thinking about morality, from an atheist standpoint, how do you convince other people in society to be moral? Right? How do you encourage people to live moral lives without appealing to something greater or higher than the individual? And so, while atheists, many would be very moral people and would want to see morality in society, one of the questions, of course, is, well, what kind of social force do you lead on for the good of society, for a moral society? So, does morality help us in determining if it's a religion or not? Maybe not. Most atheists are probably not as concerned about morality as religious people are. I mean, certainly you don't maybe have necessarily the notions of guilt because you've offended God. And so that the psychological weight of morality might not be as present in atheism. But atheists are concerned about morality. Atheists are also, many of them, tend to be concerned about social cohesion, keeping society together, fostering social bonds, working for social good. Many would think that religion should not be a part of that. On the other hand, some religions believe that other religions shouldn't be a part of that either. But the idea is that there still is that concern that people be united together for the good of the species. That as a species, we're going to continue to survive, we're going to continue to develop as we remain together. While science is not a religion, some people have turned to science as a philosophical force like religion, what we might call scientism. That science provides the answers or a way to discover the answers. And that relying on science will bring about utopia, better living through chemistry, as the way it was put in the middle of the 20th century. So is atheism a religion? Well, some expressions of atheism are similar to religion. What we would definitely say are religious. Others aren't. Some atheists, friendly ones mostly, actually see atheism turning into a religion. So even atheists are seeing it becoming religious. Often they'll refer to it as humanism or something like that. And they don't have a problem with the idea of atheism being a religion, provided it's understood the way we've been talking about. But if our primary criteria for religion, and I'm not saying it should be, but if our primary criteria in defining religion is the supernatural and the afterlife, then obviously not. Atheism is not a religion in that context. But we've talked about before some of the problems with primarily saying supernaturalism when looking at other religions as well. Whether it is a religion or not, atheism definitely has a political component to it in our contemporary sphere. Atheists have some political concerns, and we see atheism active in a couple of different ways, in not only the United States, but Western culture as well. One of which is the concerns about religion in the public sphere. So religion, if it's supposed to exist, continue to exist, it doesn't belong in public. So there should be no governmental expressions of religion, no places where government favors religion, and no ceremonies of religion, especially connected with the government, but in public as a society at all. One interesting way that this has kind of been expressed and becoming more prominent is the so-called Church of Satan, which really isn't a church of Satan, but uses Satan as a figure to try and discourage religion in the public sphere. And so if a state or a city erects a religious monument, right, the Ten Commandments, for example, you will often find the Church of Satan then asking that they may be allowed to present some sort of also satanic monument. Because some Supreme Court rulings say as long as all religions are represented, then that can be acceptable. And so this Church of Satan, who again doesn't believe in Satan but is using it to make a point, will want to have a monument to Satan, which of course most people in these places erecting these monuments would say, no way. And of course providing an opportunity for legal challenges to that. In some cases there have been concerns about not just a monument in a public park or in front of a courthouse, but expressions of personal religiosity in public spaces, headscarves on Muslim women or other types of markers of religion have been attempts have been made to outlaw some of them. Not so much in the United States, but in some places in Europe. Another political concern has actually been about religious tolerance. Especially new atheists believe that an increase in religious tolerance is actually detrimental. Because a lot of people would want to say, okay, well, how about we go the route of allowing all religions to be represented? Would that take the issue? No, said the new atheists, that allows religions to grow, especially violent ones. and would point to a variety of expressions like that. We've already talked about some new atheists trying to get things like circumcision outlawed, other things that are religious practices, and even what we might call indoctrination. Why is atheism appealing to people? Why do people become atheists? Well, probably because of some of the things that we pointed out already. And the big one being the politicizing of religion. And concerns about political religious people and what they're doing. Concerns about religion and politics. But for others, atheism appears to be more rational. And often that's how new atheists present it, as a rational alternative to religion. However, one has to wonder if most people that identify as atheists, now certainly there would be some who would rationally come to this conclusion, but do most people actually rationally take that time, or do they follow others that claim atheism is rational, and so they become atheists? It happens in religion all the time, right? Where people don't necessarily investigate for themselves, but they are convinced because a religious leader said so. And so they're probably, even though some atheists have rationally chosen atheism, right, logically sat down and attempted to discover answers, others probably accept it on its appearance of rationality. Additionally, the appearance of being scientific claims that it is in line with scientific discoveries, that it is a scientific approach to life. But what this obscures is something that even religious people fail to see, is that there are limits on what science can say about the supernatural or God. By the very fact of it being supernatural, it is beyond nature, which means there are probably qualities of it that cannot be discussed through natural means. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some places where religious people have made some claims that are patently unscientific, but science itself does not necessarily lead us to a conclusion with certainty about whether or not there is something supernatural. It cannot. But then finally, atheism is probably appealing to a lot of people because religions have failed them. Whether that's hypocrisy, whether that's the scandals, or whether it's something like some sort of emotional loss or deep hurt, and religion just didn't provide a way to address that. And so people become atheists because religions have failed to really help them get through all of that.